Peter Zablocki's newest book, Bullets That Changed America, 13 Historic Assassinations, Duels, Misfires, and Murders, from McFarland Publishing, available now wherever books are sold. One gunshot by a single person could be powerful enough to move a whole nation. Well known are the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, William McKinley, and Martin Luther King Jr. History, however, is littered with lesser-known gunshots that have had equally echoing outcomes. Some were small mistakes or misjudgments, others intentional acts that sparked events documented in our history textbooks. A single bullet serves as the catalyst for each of the stories in The Bullets That Changed America. We may or may not know who fired it, but we know each bullet's endpoint and the effects it had on America's trajectory, the wars, social movements, and political and economic paradigm shifts. The names of those involved may not to many be recognizable, but the events their acts precipitated are etched in American history. Bullets That Changed America, 13 Historic Assassinations, Duels, Misfires, and Murders, available from McFarland Publishing, wherever books are sold. Now, back to our show. This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Fresca, and welcome back to our podcast. Tommy, what do we got?
Well, today we're going to be looking at another one of these pop culture icons, right, that comes out there. Some of that I know you've been talking about wanting to do for a long time. You have like a real
fixation. Fixation?
Yeah, fixation. Sure, I was going to say a little man crush maybe, but something like fixation works too. All right, things on. You really like this time frame. You like the whole black and white era. Basically, right? So we're going to be looking at the times and the life of Harry Houdini.
So let me ask you this question. I actually pulled this up on YouTube today because I was trying to tell my son that the Jawas in Star Wars make a noise that literally sounds like they're saying Houdini.
Oh,
and my son's like,
shot and stuff.
Yeah, my son's like, no, they don't. And I'm like, no, they do. So legit, I went and I like YouTubed it and I just did like Jawa sounds. First of all, they have like a compilation of all of them from every movie, which is kind of insane that someone would take time to do that. But
free time. It's like people who do podcasts on Houdini. Like who has that much free time?
I guess, right? But sure enough, the Jawas do say Houdini. It's a thing. It's really a thing. All right. Anyway, it was just a side note here, Tom. Harry Houdini, or really Eric Weiss, right?
Eric Weiss, yes.
Born March 24th, 1874, died in mysterious circumstances, which we shall discuss in this podcast. On October 31st, 1926, he was a Hungarian escape artist, illusionist, stunt performer, really known for his escape acts, and also very much against spiritualism.
He was like not a fan of spiritualism. Big time, which is weird because at the time, a lot of other escape artists, magicians would just, again, turn of the century, they would say that they had powers, right? That they could like walk through objects.
Talk to the dead or
the spirits is what helped them. The spirits would help them do things and stuff like that, and ghosts and everything. And he was like, no, that's not how it works. You have like hidden lockpicks, or you can wiggle things out if you apply pressure certain ways. Like he was more, and he was out there really trying to stop, a big skeptic of those things and trying to stop them all also.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about the fact, he had lawsuits against different spiritualists saying like, no, you're fake. And he actually made it his business, while he's already a really known wealthy person, he kind of made it his business to expose a lot of these spiritualists that he goes, there is no ghost, there is no special powers, like you just have to be witty. And he sued people for fraud, and he won a lot of these cases. He wrote books against them. He had famous authors kind of argue with him publicly about this, which we'll talk about. And ultimately, this kind of plays a role in his death, because some people believe to this day that it might have been a group of spiritualists, notable
to kill him, right?
Yeah, that actually might have had something to do with his death. What do we got, Tom? Where does this guy start? Where's the beginning of Harry Houdini? What do we know about his, early beginnings in youth?
Well, he was born, like you said, Eric Weiss, right? He was born in Budapest, Kingdom of Hungary. He was part of a Jewish family. His father was a rabbi, right? And his mother he was very close with his mother. That's something that you'll see a lot if you do any research on him. A lot of pictures with him and his mother. When he becomes rich and famous, he buys his mother a dress that was worn, I think, by a Queen of England. And like he brings her out to all the relatives, and she's wearing this dress and she's smiling, and he's like, "This was like the greatest day of my life." So he's a big time with his mother. He was one of
Yeah, he
seven
loves his
children.
mama.
He's
Yep.
one of seven children, and they arrive in the United States in 1878. So you got to remember, we still know the name Houdini today. This guy's like he's from the 1800s. Like that's when he was born.
Yep.
So it's a long time ago, a long time ago.
Yep.
And it's when they come over from that they changed the spelling of their name, and he changed a little bit too, and they wind up living in Appleton, Wisconsin, where again his father served as a
Rabbi.
rabbi, yeah, for a Jewish congregation there. And his family wound up moving to Milwaukee, and they were pretty poor when they were there.
Yep.
And then they went from there. They moved to New York City, where they live in a boarding house. And he was joined, and that's very kind of as a child where he grew up. He worked a lot of these small jobs, right? Just basically kind of like pay off debt and stuff. And one of them was a trapeze artist. And that's when he started calling himself the Prince of the Air, because he actually was an aviator too later on in his life. He was a big time pilot.
Yeah, I know he was an athlete. He was an aviator, but trapeze artist. Like that was the beginning. He was 9 years old, and that started as like basically like a public debut. But it was really a gig to try to help his father make money, because in 1887, it was just his father and himself that moved to New York City, and they moved into this boarding house because they couldn't even afford to bring the rest of the family yet from Milwaukee. So he starts picking up jobs and winds up basically being like a circus act, the Prince of the Air, and he helps make enough money for his father and himself to bring the rest of the family over to New York City. Shortly thereafter, he's a young kid. He starts to perform different magic tricks, and he calls himself Harry Houdini, essentially after a French magician, right? The guy's name was Jean Eugene Robert Houdin. And Harry Houdini, had this belief that if you add, again, misplaced belief, that if you add an I in the name at the end of a name of something, it meant like esque, like, like short esque, or, kind of like something. So he added the I to it. So it was Houdini, meaning like Houdin. As for his first name, it was actually stems from his nickname, right? Harry, which was a nickname from at least the nickname that his family gave him. So Harry became Harry, and he became Harry Houdini. As a teenager, he is essentially taught this craft by another magician, Joseph Rinn, at an athletic club in New York. And initially, he kind of doesn't work out for him. He's not a great magician by any means. And
it's not working.
Yeah, he performs in like dime shows and here and there, like shows up on the street. Really, even at some point, he doubles as wild man in the circus, which is like the worst job you could have in a circus.
Yeah, he wasn't doing escape acts yet for the most part. He was doing mostly card tricks, I think. I was reading a lot of card tricks.
That was another one of his names, right?
Well, yeah, anything to bill himself. Remember, he's a showman, so it's anything to bill himself and things of that nature.
Yeah, it almost seems like what's going to stick, right? Like, all right, I'm the king of cards. But they actually said that he wasn't really that great with his card tricks, so that didn't pan out. And then his brother joins him. So this is at the time now. We're talking like 1890s.
1894, 95.
Yeah, he's a teenager, and him and his brother start experimenting with these escape acts. And, they're getting booked here and there at these dime shows and dime museums and side shows and even a circus. And brother's name was Dash, was nickname, at least first name was Theodore. At Coney Island, right? They open an act as Brothers Houdini, where they're trying this whole escape thing, which we'll get into in a second. This is where he meets his wife, right? Patrice Bess Rauner.
She was originally Dash was like going after her at first, or trying to court her, I guess you would say first. Yeah. But she winds up marrying Houdini, and he was madly in love with her.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, and the thing is, what's interesting too, if you read their story, is she was Catholic, and her family was like very much against this eventual marriage.
Jewish,
yeah, because he was Jewish. And after he passes away, she lives for like another 30 years or so. And when she passes away, against her own wishes, her family refuses to bury her next to him, because they're so Catholic that they refuse to bury her in a Jewish cemetery, which is interesting because that was her wish. Like that was her husband, and her family was like, talk about holding a grudge, huh? So Bess Houdini kind of takes over from Dash, and she kind of replaces him in the act, and they become known as instead of the Houdini brothers, just simply the Houdinis. And at that point, Bess pretty much becomes his stage assistant for the remainder of Houdini's career. So then in 1899, he meets and signs with a manager, Martin Beck, in Minnesota, Handcuffs Act, right? And he's kind of known for this one.
Yeah, Beck really started to advertise him and really advised him, listen, let's focus on your escape acts. Forget about all these other things. We're going to focus on the just the escape acts. And within months, like he starts to become really popular. So he starts going on tours of Europe. He does some interviews, and he's really starting to take off. And he gives a demonstration of how he can escape with these handcuffs at Scotland Yard.
That's the big one. That's the one that makes
him. That's a big one with Scotland Yard. And then that's also when he starts challenging other police forces around the world to listen, come up with something, and I'm going to escape it.
Yep.
And he succeeded in, like, the police didn't understand how he could do this. And then he just becomes booked, and he starts making a lot of money. They say he's making about $300 a week, which is probably close. It's over $9,000 in today's money. So it kind of shows you inflation right there. But so he's becoming super popular with these handcuffs. And now he's known as the Handcuff King. So this is his next,
that's his gig.
His next gig is the Handcuff King. He's escape all of these things.
And he does this in Netherlands, Germany, France, Russia,
all over the world.
Across Europe. And he's getting paid so much that he's actually one of the world's highest paid entertainers. Remember, guys, there's no radio yet. There is no TV yet. There's no movies. I mean, that's not even like motion pictures aren't even really a thing yet. Like, this guy is just simply word of mouth becoming one of the highest paid entertainers in the world. And it all stems from the fact that he started challenging all of these different police stations. He's like, put me in handcuffs. Eventually it got to like chain me up, put me in handcuffs, lock me in a box, and then watch me get out of it. And he continued and continued and continued to the extent that he basically, becomes super famous. Then he's finally, I mean, again, I feel like as I studied this, he's definitely has a lot to do with courts. He's always suing people or getting sued, interesting enough, or starting patents. So that way, like, I trademark this, like, and he would just sue people. But while he was in Germany, a police officer actually alleged that he escaped through one of his escapes through bribery. So Houdini sued him.
He sued the guy, yeah. Well, do you see how he won the case?
This was the one where he basically said to the
judge, he winds up
like, look, I could do this. I'll show you.
I'll show you, and I'll unlock the safe. And he unlocks the safe. Mm-hmm. He breaks into the safe, but he later says that the judge forgot to lock the safe.
That's what it was.
He was able to do it, but whatever. Yeah. But he wins that case because of it.
Because he tells the judge, like, no, I could get out of things. I could unlock anything.
This is what I do. Yeah.
And then he basically is like, I can unlock your safe. And the judge's like, fine, if you unlock my safe, like, we believe you. And then he's like, yeah, the safe wasn't locked, but he unlocked it. All right. So after that, he winds up returning. He's like a made man when it comes to really Europe, in the sense that he has the money, he's got the wealth, he's got a title, but that's mostly in Europe. So he returns from Europe. And then what winds up happening is first of all, this is where the whole idea of a dress comes into play that you talked about, right? He buys this dress made for Queen Victoria and for tons of money and gives it to his mother and presents her to all the relatives at his big party. And then in 1904, he officially returns to the U.S. after going back and forth between Europe and purchases a house in Harlem, New York City, right? And it cost him $25,000, which is equivalent to about close to $800,000 in today's money. He creates his own publication while he's here. It doesn't really work out. In his publication, he really kind of wanted to just use it.
He just talked about himself. He used it to kind of promote himself and to attack spiritualists. So they only lasted like 2 volumes. Yeah, and you see that's a lot of things. He said a lot when Houdini started getting on a roll. He started really talking. That's what he started to talk about. Like, he would get himself like riled up. He went after his rivals, because there was a lot of other individuals at that time that would try to one up him or steal his technique. That's one reason why he stops doing a lot of the handcuff tricks, is because so many other people do it. So he ups the ante and he starts doing these like much more intense escape things, which we can talk about. The straight jackets,
I feel like we'll mention
the mail bags, obviously the milk crates, and the Chinese water torture. But he does all that because people keep on imitating his handcuff one. So he's like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. Then I'm going to go on and do something else. And he's basically trying to make it so difficult, so intense, that no one else is even going to try it because it's so dangerous, which is what he starts to do with some of these escapes.
And actually, what's interesting too is what he does is, as soon as he does this act, he often started his acts and did them in front of just a select group of people, so that way there was a witness, and then he would trademark it right away and copyright it. Like, okay, this is my move, so if you want to do this move, you have to give me credit. And he actually made a lot of money that way, but also, sued a lot of people that would try to like replicate what he was doing.
Something similar, yeah.
And he was like, no, I did that first. You got to give me credit, kind of thing. And he never claimed. So people were like, dude, you have to have supernatural powers. I mean, like, they would lock him up, water filled, like you said, milk can. They would put him in like a coffin box, nail it shut, put chains around it, put chains inside it and on him, drop it to the bottom of a river, and then he would emerge within a minute. And they were like, how do you do this? Like, you have to have natural powers. And he's like, nope, supernatural powers. Like, I'm just really clever. Like, that's how I roll. Um, I mean, he's suspended upside down, right? In a locked glass and steel cabinet full of like overflowing water, the famous or infamous Chinese water torture cell. Um, you know, in a sense, he kind of becomes the face of all magicians, and actually, that kind of towards the end becomes his big, not job, but I guess role, right? Because he becomes the president of the Society of American Magicians,
Yeah.
basically from 1917 until 1926, and he is the longest running president. Up to that point, each president of the Society of American Magicians was only president for 1 year. He's the president from 1917 to 26, and he's continuously trying to like advertise it and go to other magicians and try to get magicians involved in the Society of American Magicians and try to create some credibility for magicians. It's almost like he's trying to make the idea of being a magician reputable for profession, I would
Yeah.
say.
Well, he's
Right?
making a business. It's becoming a
Yeah.
business, like a business model for it, like anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's now the richest and longest surviving organization of magicians in the world. They say there's like 6,000 members right now that pay dues, and almost like 300 assemblies worldwide from what he started. Like, this is a respectable position. Oh my god, I keep on thinking of like some of the stuff that he did, like the
We can
elephant.
talk
Remember, he
about a
made the
couple.
elephant disappear.
Well,
I mean,
yeah. Well, he had to buy that trick.
yes, I
That
did
was
see
something
that.
nice. So he actually bought that trick from another magician, because again he was all about this. He was like, something was really good, and that's what he did. He just made Jenny, the
Yeah,
vanishing
that was
elephant. This
yeah,
was
yeah.
in 1917, so he kind of just made it disappear on stage, and he would do that for a while. But again, like he never really stuck with some of these acts that long. And a lot of times, what happens after he would do it for a while, then his brother would keep on doing it. Like a
Yep.
lot of the milk can escape and some of the Chinese war torture. He would do it for like 4 years, and then on and off. And then his brother would keep on doing. His brother kept on doing these tricks into the 1940s.
Yep. Like his number one thing was vaudeville, and vaudeville could be a podcast in itself. Ultimately, you would have theaters in different cities, whether there were big cities like New York City or Boston, or even smaller cities. Pretty much wherever a city could put in a theater. Again, this is like 1900, 1917. You have silent films that are just coming out. This is whole new thing, but vaudeville is key. If you had a theater in town, you would basically have the theater owners book these vaudeville acts, and these high paid performers would come in to do the different shows, whether it was magic tricks, whether it was dance routines, whether it was comedy things, and think of like Abbott and Costello kind of vaudeville, like this idea of just different acts doing their thing and entertaining people, and that's kind of what he became the most notable for. People wanted to book his act in these vaudeville theaters. Let's talk about some of his crazy escapes that this guy did. I mean, he almost died numerous times, but one
Several
specifically,
times.
right?
Several times. Yeah, well, I guess I started one of the beginning ones, which was the Daily Mirror Challenge,
Mm-hmm.
which took place in London in 1904, where there was basically Nathaniel Hart was a locksmith, and he said he spent 5 years making these special handcuffs, and Houdini actually accepts the challenge, and he decides to perform this at a matinee. And about 4,000 people, about 100 journalists come to this, event. It's all hyped up. It's like super. People are really excited about it, and the escape attempt that was dragged on for over an hour. He kept on coming in and out. From
Well,
the
because
ghost
they
house.
thought he wasn't going to be able to do it. There's so much controversy because they're like, dude, his wife totally
Yes.
helped him.
Well, some people say his wife helped him. Other people say he actually could have got out of it in like 5 minutes, but he was a showman, so he was making it like take longer. But basically, he did ask for the cuffs to be removed so he could take his coat off because it was so hot, and they said no, because then you're going to see how the cuffs get unlocked. So we're not
And
going to
these are
tell you
like
that.
special made cuffs that have like a six-inch key to unlock.
Yeah, just
like,
for him. Exactly. Yeah. So he takes out a penknife and cuts off his jacket using his teeth.
Yep.
And then basically,
and then it goes back behind the curtain, right? Because they see him. You see him behind the curtain, so you see what he's doing, but like you don't see the intricacies of it.
Yeah,
it
it's kind of like
suspended.
yeah. And his wife comes on one and gives him a kiss, and that's when they say, "Oh, she was hiding the thing in his mouth," and also gives him a glass of water. I think at one point he's like, "Oh, the water had the key in it," but he said the key was 6 inches long. You're not going to be able to hide that, or anything like that. But basically, he winds up eventually getting out of it. He comes back from the curtain. After about an hour and 10 minutes, he emerged free, and he was exhausted. He even said it was the most difficult escape of his career. He broke down and cried afterwards, and the crowd was so excited. And again, this is like pre. I don't think now people sitting there for an hour and a half or whatever watching a
Yeah,
guy try
watch
to
this guy
take
behind a curtain, like,
behind a curtain
will
try to
he?
take handcuffs off is not going to be really like, I don't know. People can be like, oh wow, this is amazing,
Dude,
but people
phones
were
would be
so,
out in 3 seconds. People would
oh
be
yeah,
playing like,
but
Candy Crush.
people were so like went crazy for this. They threw him. They were cheering. They threw him on their shoulders. They're like, oh my god! Because literally every second that he's doing, they're just watching. Like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? It's just crazy, like how the attention spans like shifted since then.
Crazy. And then the milk can escape kind of follows that. That is like him upping the ante. And then basically the premise here is very simple. Houdini handcuffed and then sealed inside an oversized milk can that is filled with water and made his. The idea is they place this behind a curtain again, and boom, let's see if he gets out. He's in a sealed milk can, full of water, and he's handcuffed, and people are trying to figure out how he's going to get out of it. And
Without
um,
drowning.
yeah, or drown, and that was the key. That was supposed to like add the another level of excitement because it's
Yeah.
like, all right,
Well, yeah.
he gets
He could
out
die.
or he dies. Yeah, like,
Yeah. It's
that
one or the
was
other. You're
basically
even gonna you're gonna
it's
see him
crazy,
live or you're gonna see him die, which is also like morbid. I'm not sure if that would also fly in
right?
2020 standards.
Um, yeah, and I mean, and this was just a big thing, like added a little extra element of suspense. Um, Eventually they modified it because they wound up making it a little harder. So they put the milk crate or can was then in itself locked inside another wooden chest, which was then chained and padlocked. So the idea was like, okay, you're in a water can that, and you have all these cuffs on, and that's closed, and then that's in a wooden chest, which is chained and padlocked, and then you have to somehow escape from it. And he did this numerous times. Like this was like his jam. Eventually, as you mentioned earlier, his brother kind of picks that up even after his death, and that's kind of his brother's signature move was this milk can escape.
The milk can escape, yeah. But he kind of, because Houdini kind of one ups this around 1912 when he creates the Chinese water torture, where
Yep.
his feet is basically are locked in stocks and he's lowered upside down into a tank filled with water. There's like a metal cell around him with a glass front, so the people could see him. So that's big too. Like he's underwater, but people can see him the whole time.
Yeah, he's
And,
upside down.
yeah, and
Yep.
so he was enclosed in this cage, and eventually he makes it even more difficult. Where I think they do, what do they do? They put him in like a straight jacket also, so doing
Yep.
all this other stuff
While in water, while upside
while he's
down.
water.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he's holding his breath the whole time. I think a lot of times he did this with the milk can escape too. He had people like he would challenge people to try to hold their breath as long as he did, as
Yep.
he was trying to get out. So he
And
could hold his breath for over 3 minutes.
crazy. Well, going back to the milk escape real quick, what's interesting here is this was another case where he kind of brings us to court because other magicians started repeating this, and he basically sued some of them and says, "No, this act is copyrighted. Like I invented this act. You need to pay me to do this act." And he winds up settling out of court in 1906 with another magician who actually agrees to publish an apology. Like, yes, I'm sorry, you did this first. Like, he's a businessman, first and foremost. He does these tricks, but he's like, no, 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 I'm going to make money off of anybody else doing the same similar tricks. The Chinese water torture, what they also made it more difficult for him is they actually started putting him up where he's upside down in this big water cage, right, in a straight jacket, but then they would actually put in another cage within it that basically like would almost render him like unable to move. It was like a smaller cage within a cage. And even though this was often advertised as the Chinese water torture cell, he never actually referred to it as such. Right? He called it the upside down. The first time he did it was in Berlin.
The
And he
USD.
continued doing this over and over again. This became kind of like another popular one until his death. Then you have suspended straitjacket escape. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory, right? He's like, all right, suspend me from my ankles in a straitjacket from a crane on top of, from a super tall building. This actually this was interesting because the first couple of times he did this, there was like heavy winds when he's up there at these tall buildings, and it started throwing him around so much that he literally just kept on hitting the side of the building and like almost knocking himself out as he was trying to do it. So as he like continued this act, they're like, all right, like, while we hoist him up by a crane up to this big building, let's actually connect like a wire to his leg. And every time, the wind would actually like move him close to a building, this wire would like draw him back so he could actually complete his trick without, like banging his head against the wall. I thought it was kind of interesting. There's video of this, apparently. You could see it. Library
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Congress has.
there's videos of Houdini doing these. Basically, he's hanging from upside down and do these
Thomas
things.
Edison. We did a podcast on that. Thomas Edison is the reason we have Houdini's recorded voice. The reason we have Houdini really, videos of early stunts. Like that's all Thomas Edison helped us out with some inventions. All right, so overboard box escape. This is a cool one.
One of his famous. This is one of the stunts he would do. He escaped from a nailed and roped packing crate after it was lowered into water. So again, it's that threat of drowning. He first performed it in New York's East River, which I don't think you want to go in the East River
What did you notice that
nowadays.
actually the police didn't
1912.
let him do it? I think it was the
Yeah, they
police,
forbid it
right?
from using it on one of the piers, so he had to hire a tugboat and he invited the press on a tugboat, and then he went it that way because they were said no, you can't do it. But he was locked in handcuffs, leg irons, nailed in the crate, which was roped and weighed down to 200 pounds of lead, and was then lowered into the water, and he escaped in 57 seconds. So he found his way out,
How?
and it
Like I
was
don't understand. I don't
you know, he
understand.
he he had magic. I think he just lied. But the crate was pulled to the surface, and it was found still to be intact and everything. And he performed this stunt many times. He performed a version of it on stage, and had specially built like tanks and stuff like that. And this kind of inspired him to do his next one of his last like really famous ones, which was his buried alive stunt. Which the first time he did it in Santa Ana, California, he almost died. He
Yeah,
was
this is a
buried
freaky
alive
one.
because he was buried alive, but he was buried alive with no casket in a pit 6 feet under.
Yep.
And he basically slowly dug his way out. He became exhausted and he panicked and actually had a call for help. Barely. He did break the surface. He got out technically,
Yeah,
but then
well,
his
his hand got
assistant,
out, right?
yeah,
That was it.
and his assistant had to pull him out because he passed out. He fell unconscious. And he said it was, basically the weight of the earth was like on top of him, just killing him the whole time. So when he does this after this, when he does it after this, he's doing this to expose a spiritualist, right? An Egyptian performer named Raham Bey, who said that he used supernatural powers to stay in a sealed casket because he didn't have to breathe, whatever. And he's like, no, you're lying. I'm going to stay in the casket longer than you. And I'm going to say that I can do it through breathing techniques, not from no supernatural powers. But this is when he did it. After that first attempt, every time he did it, he was in a casket or a box or something. He didn't just do like buried.
Yeah, actually, one of the caskets that he would use to repeat this particular stunt was used to transport his real body from Detroit to New
The
York
bronze
City
one,
following
yeah,
his
there's a
death.
the
Yeah,
bronze
because
one.
like they had nothing else available. It's kind of crazy. It's like, all right, well, let's take the stunt. On top of that, obviously, a few things here that we kind of just briefly touch upon because I don't feel like they really deal much with Dini, but he did, start a movie company and actually made a lot of different. Not a lot. That's an exaggeration. He made some movies, and kind of tried his. He's a businessman, so you try to dip his toes in the film business. But this is such the film business and the movies overall at this point are silent movies. It's such a like it's in such infancy, this business, that I don't blame the fact that he winds up quitting. He's like, there's not enough money in this. There's one full length feature movie that was supposedly his best, and then because it was made from nitrate film back then, so it was like super low survival rate. Right, film historians basically thought this film was lost, and then of course there's one guy somewhere, right? Always some private collector that's like, well, actually, I have this film. And the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is the Houdini museum in the
Yeah.
world, the directors of the museum begged this private collector, like, "Can you please show it to us?" So he actually brought him in and did a screening for them. They're like, "Oh my gosh, like this is the lost film. That's a full length feature of Harry Houdini. It's 71 minutes, which at the time, for the times, was a super long film." And they begged him and begged him if he could somehow sell it to Turner Classic Movies, which this guy finally does. In like 2015, he winds up selling it to Turner Classic Movies. They spend millions of dollars restoring it and show it to the public for the first time in like 96 years in March of 2015, which I think is kind of cool. What else? As you mentioned earlier, private life. He was a pilot. He absolutely loved flying. It became kind of like his hobby towards the end. It's probably this whole like adrenaline thing he's got going here. It's like the Tom Cruise of his time, I guess. But I think what we really need to cover here and spend some time on this is kind of how passionate he was about debunking any spiritualists, right? Like
Yeah, he hated
psychics,
him.
mediums. He's like, no, these people are fakes. And he literally made it his business to like ruin some careers. So he started attending this seances, right? Accompanied by a reporter and a police officer, and he kind of hides and wears disguises, and he basically sits there and debunks them. He's like, all right, this person's BSing because of this, boom, and this person's BSing because of that. And he winds up publishing these stories on how he's debunking them in different newspapers. And eventually, he even winds up writing a book in which he winds up exposing some of these other people. It's almost interesting. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, was he scarred by something at some point? Because this really seemed like a mission of his. You know, a magician among the
Well, it
spirits.
was his
Like, that
mission.
was one of
Yeah.
his books.
Yeah, he just didn't like them for it. He just said no. Look, he had little patience for anyone who claimed to have supernatural powers. Like, no, that's not how it works. So he even offered people a $10,000 reward if you could prove that you had psychic powers or any psychic phenomenon, which was a huge amount of money back then. And he even testified before Congress in support of a bill that would outlaw pretending to tell fortunes or rewards
Fortune
for
tellers in
compensation.
Washington, D.C.,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, so
Make
he
it
was like
illegal.
he did not want anything to do with these people. He did not trust them and stuff like that. And he even, I guess we can talk about it now. Like after he dies, you talked about it earlier.
Oh, the
Gave like
message
a
to his wife, right?
secret message to his wife. It'd be like, if there is a way to communicate after death, this is the message. This is the only one thing I'm going to say. And then supposedly it's like, what was it? Roosevelt believe, was it? I believe it's
Yep.
supposed to say. Someone did find up saying it, but they found out that person found out the code somehow, or using other clues was able to figure it out. So she, after 10 years, she stopped doing the seances. But they still do them all the time around the country. On Halloween, they have these Harry Houdini seances all the time. Every year on Halloween, which is the anniversary of his
Yeah, and he died
death.
on Halloween. Like, what are the
He
odds,
died on
right?
Halloween. Yeah.
We know Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He's the author of Sherlock Holmes. At the time, an extremely popular author in the world. And he used to be friends with Houdini, but Doyle actually believed in spiritualism, and he believed in spirits, and he believed in the afterlife and all that stuff. And he refused to believe any of Houdini's exposés, and he basically said that privately and then eventually publicly, Doyle would say that Houdini really was a powerful spiritualist medium. Like, there's no way he could be doing what he does, and therefore, there was supposedly some paranormal abilities that he possessed, and Houdini took offense to that, and actually, basically, the two of them, this most known magician in the world, and at the time, probably one of the most, if not the most popular author in the world, basically battled it out in different newspaper editorials. Like, nope, you're lying. Nope, you're lying. No, spiritualism is wrong. No, you're a spiritualist. It was kind of intense in a sense. Let's talk about his death. I feel like, I mean, that's a
Yeah,
biggie,
his
right?
death is probably just as famous as his life, right? So
Right.
there's some witnesses to this event, right, that takes place. But it kind of understand you have to backtrack a little bit to what happened a little bit beforehand, right?
Yep.
It's not just what happened, but
October
what
11th,
happened.
1926. I think, right?
Yeah,
Is that the Chinese water torch where he gets hurt?
yeah,
Is that what
Tiny
you're talking
Water.
about?
That's what happened. So in 1926, that's one of his final. He's while being shackled in his water torture cell in Albany, New York. He was struck in the leg by a piece of like faulty equipment, and it hobbled. And he hobbled his way the rest of the show, and he found that he kind of fractured really badly his left ankle.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, he was, and against doctor's orders, he continued his tour and traveled to Montreal, where he gave a lecture at McGill University. And then October 22nd, he invited some of these students to visit him in his dressing room, right, at the Princess Theater. And his ankle was sore. It was still bothering, so he was sitting on a couch.
They say it was like hunched over, sitting on a
Yeah,
couch,
hunched
right?
over, yeah.
And
At
it's like
some
random
point,
student.
a student named James Gordon Whitehead, right, arrived and asked Houdini if it was true that he could resist hard punches to his abdomen. And it's something that Houdini did claim, as long as he was like prepared for it and stuff like that. So according to witnesses,
This guy just started
someone
punching
about,
him.
yeah, well, not that guy who asked, but this other guy, Sam
Smilovitz. Yeah,
Smilovitz,
it was a
right?
witness.
Said that the rumors were true, and then Whitehead started delivering 4 or 5 really hard, forceful blows to his abdomen. Well directed. This kid knew how to punch, and he just wailed on him like 4 or 5 hard times right in the stomach. And Houdini was still reclining on the couch and had no time to prepare for the punches, and he kind of like shrugged him off the punches, like tried to look like a tough guy. But you could tell he was in considerable pain. And that same evening, he began to complain of discomfort, stomach cramps, and his condition only got worse and then he boarded an overnight train for Detroit to continue to run these performances, even after his temperature rose to 104 degrees.
Yep.
Like nowadays, basically, if this was nowadays, he would never be allowed to do any of that stuff. They would take him right to the hospital. But This is still, in the 1920s, so it's a little bit different. And so they suspected appendicitis and instructed him to go to the hospital, but he still says no. His I think his temperature goes up to 106, right?
Yep. And the thing is, he like collapses. At one point, he collapses during
Yeah,
the show. Then like they revive him, and he's
they
like, "I can do
revive
this."
him.
He finishes it, and then
Which,
collapses at the end.
yeah, that would be his last show at the Garrick Theater.
Yep.
And then that's his last performance. He's taken to Detroit Hospital. They prepare for surgery. They remove his appendix. They saw that it ruptured several days earlier, and there was nothing they could really do because they could tell it already. Once your appendix ruptures and it poisons your insides,
Yeah, you
that's
don't
it.
have much time. You got to
This
be
time, so
quick.
he clung to life for a while, but then he eventually dies on October 31st with his wife and his brothers by his side. He never had kids, and so the cause of his death was listed as a ruptured appendix at the time. And that's what a lot of doctors said. But they said it's actually kind of rare for that to happen like that, like a traumatic appendicitis.
Yeah.
Were very rare. But the insurance company paid out saying that he died in accidental death. But obviously, there's a lot of
Yeah, he got double indemnity or
conspiracies.
whatever it's called, right?
Yeah,
Double. Yeah.
yeah,
They paid a
indemnity. But
lot.
there's a lot of also ideas that he was actually poisoned by spiritualists,
Yep.
and that kind of led to his death. But who knows?
Well,
But
besides being poisoned by spiritualists, there's some evidence to suggest that the actual student that hit him was a
yeah, was
spiritualist
this
and or
spiritualist stuff? Yeah,
was in like cahoots, I guess, with spiritualists, and supposedly he was sent by them to
to do
deliver
that.
this
Yeah,
blow, and not to kill him per se, but just to like hurt him, um, and to this day, there's books written about this. Like there was a spiritualist hit that beat him and essentially
yeah,
led to this.
yeah.
But even
Even
the
in
fact that
2005. Yeah,
it doesn't happen often that you could rupture your appendix from blunt force. Like it
no,
needs
it's
to be
not
like a
easy.
car crash or something, you know? There's absolutely no evidence that could connect this student to any kind of criminal plot. So basically they're like, hey, listen, Houdini died because of this. And there in 2008, Houdini's grandnephew, I think,
Yeah.
actually gave permission to like exhume Houdini's body. Like, let's check it out, see if he was poisoned. And some people are like, dude, just let it be. And even though he gave permission, no one's ever taken him up on it. So Houdini still lays in New York City cemetery.
It's in Queens. Yeah.
And then this is, kind of what you said before is that, Houdini told his wife, like, all right, hold this seance. And then, on the anniversary of my death, and I will, if it's possible, come back to talk to you. And she does this for like 10 years. Every single anniversary of his death on Halloween, she holds a seance, and it never panned out. And finally, she's like, forget it. Like, I can't keep on waiting for this guy. And she kind of moves on because Houdini's ghost refuses to speak. But to this day, as you mentioned, people show up and try to get Houdini's ghost to talk to him on Halloween.
Yeah, he's
Interesting.
still a pop culture icon today. That's
Of
part of his
course, yeah.
legacy. There's a popular culture, but also there's a whole bunch of. I think Adrian Brody even played him on a TV miniseries in like
Yeah.
2014. But there's a Houdini museum. Like obviously he did all those things, and it's a name that people know. Like even today, people know who Harry Houdini is. They know that
Yeah,
name.
like, right? You say
You may not
Marilyn
know much
Monroe,
about him,
boom, you
but
know who I'm talking about. I say
yeah,
Elvis, you know who I'm talking about. Harry Houdini, it seems like people just know
yeah,
who I'm talking about.
it's a
Like,
name. Yeah,
it's a name. He didn't really live that long. I mean,
no, it's only
this guy could have
56.
done so much more. Yeah. I mean,
50,
his
only
wife lived to
52.
1943. She winds up dying from, I believe, a heart attack. What else you got?
Well, I do. Whenever we do people, we kind of do these fun facts. So one that I did find that I thought was interesting, that I think a lot of people probably would know, is that he actually assisted American war effort during World War
Oh,
One.
yeah. He did tours, right?
Where he did tours, but he also he was big on he totally supported U.S. involvement, even though he was born in Hungary. But also he did raising money for the war effort. But he also they took American troops and he held classes, and he showed them how to escape sinking ships and to get themselves from
Out of
ropes,
ropes, handcuffs.
handcuffs
Yeah.
and restraints in case they ever captured. So he showed a lot of his moves, things he would do. He actually gave these showed these to American soldiers, so that if they ever were captured and tied up, or if they were in a sinking ship, what to do and stuff like that. Which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting. He's giving them these skills.
Yeah. And again, he was one of the pioneers of, what eventually becomes a common practice in World War II, where you have famous stars going out and entertaining troops,
Yeah.
whether it's eventually
USO, all that
Korean
sort of
War,
stuff.
Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe, or World War II at Hollywood stars. And, the same thing. Woodrow Wilson, basically used him. And he actually winds up canceling his tour during World War I and basically just devotes himself to entertaining soldiers and raising money. Like he goes from base to base to base, which I think is kind of cool.
That's pretty cool. You have his life, you have his acts, and then you have his death, and then all everything that goes with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think that pretty much covers Harry Houdini, or as the
Sums it up.
Javas would say, Houdini.
Yeah, stop saying that.
Dude, I'm telling you, they say Houdini. Watch Star
Okay.
Wars. Houdini.
I'm George Lucas.
Right?
George
It
Lucas
was like a
put in that.
subtle or not so subtle, like, hey, I like Harry Houdini kind of thing.
I thought they just made all those noises, but like banging pieces of metal together.
They did,
Like spinning
actually.
them up and
I saw
slowing
the
it
making
down.
of. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So I don't. But okay,
Anyway.
if it sounds like Harry Houdini, you go with that, Pete.
Yep, I know. Please. Anyway, so we're kind of we're getting close, Tom. We're getting close to our 100th episode. I mean, I can't believe we've been doing this for. This is our 96th episode, which doesn't include the short lectures. Like that's a lot of episodes.
So that's a lot of time we've been doing this. Yeah.
It's a lot of time. But what's interesting too is like here we are, and we're like, dude, we should do this, and then you'll be like, we did that already. Oh yeah, we did. Like, no, how about this? Yeah, I think we did that too. Yeah, that's 100 episodes, a lot. So we're trying to plan something special or something cool for the 100th episode. So we'll keep you guys updated if this actually pans out. Because we have so many plans that usually fall through. Because then like Monday, like the weekend turns into Monday, and then we're like, well, that sucked. Like back to work.
Next time.
But yeah, we'll figure something out. But until then, everyone, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. We really do appreciate it. I hope everyone has an awesome week. If you need to find us, you can find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. We are there to answer any of your questions. Make sure you click that subscribe button and enjoy your week, everyone. See you next week.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.